So here we are in my second episode at Graham Studios. New studio, new Graham. No, same Graham. Different studio though. Today I'll be sharing my story. The intention behind today's episode is just share my story a little bit better because I realize I don't really have an origin story out there and share three key lessons that I wish I knew a decade ago. So yeah, that's the goal today. I'll get right into it and I'll do my best to be engaging, make it fun, make it practical, because I know for those of you watching this, you're going to be asking yourself what's in it for you. So I have that question at the back of my mind as well and want to make this as practical, as useful as possible. So I'll start at the very beginning, where I was born, how I was raised, the type of family I was in, when I moved to Canada, and how that entire thing unfolded, and where I am today as a 29-year-old man living in Toronto, Canada. So I was born and raised in Iran. I was born in a hospital in Tehran, the capital, and I grew up with my sister, who was actually came 5.5 years after me, in a middle upper class family. Both my parents are doctors. I never really had to struggle for money. I was never hungry. I always had a roof over my head. I always had the things that I wanted. I felt like were always provided. And I'm grateful to my parents for allowing that to happen. If you lived in a household like that, it's easy to take it for granted, the things you had growing up. And if you didn't, if you grew up poor, then you also understand how difficult it can be to not have those things. And so looking back, like in this moment, I can appreciate all the hard work that my parents put in, all the support they provided, and they continue to provide for me. So up until about 8, 9, I was really into basketball and sports. Like it was really easy for me to get lost in sport. I remember on my second grade graduation, we used to have these ceremonies and they would always give something to the kids to take home. I had a soccer ball and I brought it home, and I don't know, I was like 7 or 8, and I was so engrossed in this ball and kicking it around that I kicked and hit this glass painting. Not a painting, it was more of a, it was like a carpet or some sort of like handiwork. It was on the wall. I kicked the ball around and I hit this thing. The glass broke. And at this point, I'd come in the house a few minutes before my mom. So my mom came in. She saw that. She freaked out and grabbed my ball, went onto the balcony, and just kicked it far, far away. Uh, it just goes to show how I was into sports and athletics as a kid. It was something that was natural for me. I always remember being part of swimming camps, soccer camps, and I was really good at soccer growing up. That was the main sport in Iran, and I used to just kill the other kids during the gym hour with my skills. And I remember it used to keep me up at night. I was so excited to go into physical education class the day after, that once a week, that Tuesday evening that I was getting ready for the class, I would imagine all these things up in my head about the highlights I would have. I would just see my highlight reel before I slept, and that was what I was naturally drawn to as a kid. And it came back later when I was trying to figure out what I should be doing with myself for a career. And 20-ish years later, I'm a trainer at one of the top gyms in Toronto, and I'll share more about that later. So during that time, that childhood time, I was involved in a lot of sports. And in grade 6, we decided to move to Canada as a family. And during this period, I kind of was at a loss of identity. I didn't really know who I was because I was introduced to this new culture as like a teenager. And I was still trying to find who I was becoming as a man. But then being introduced to this new community of uh, kids who spoke English, and I didn't really feel confident speaking, even though I had been going to a bilingual school since I was a kindergarten kid. I didn't really have that identity, or I didn't know who I was supposed to be to fit in. And fitting in ends up being a big theme throughout this entire period up until honestly recently. So I tried to find friends. I was still going uh, into sports, and I continued to play soccer up until high school. So middle school was cool, was fun. High school, I ended up going to a completely different neighborhood because my mom didn't want me to go to the school that was close to our house because she believed um, it would turn me into a drug dealer. It wasn't, the school didn't have the best reputation. And so every morning I would take a general transit bus, a TTC bus. That's what we call it here in Toronto, Toronto Transit Commission bus. I would take that bus to get to the school bus, which would then take me to school. So my commute every day was about 40 minutes to an hour. And I would take that commute by myself. And in high school, I didn't really know anybody other than one of my friends who I didn't really run into because he was in the IB program, which is a more advanced, like more intensive program, and I was in the regular program. Throughout high school, again, this theme of fitting in and lack of confidence persisted because I still didn't know who I wanted to be, and I had trouble fitting in with the popular kids. And so eventually I found my group of friends that um, kind of took me in for who I was, accepted me. And I transitioned from soccer to more basketball so I can fit in with this group of people. And I found myself enjoying the sport of basketball, using it as a vehicle to connect with other people. And it really started to solidify in me the idea that sports makes me feel good and sports allows me to express myself authentically. And it just became part of my being. It was a way for me to connect with people. It was a way for me to lose myself in what I was doing. And it was a way for me to feel a sense of accomplishment because there's always that sense of getting better at something and pursuing something that makes me better. And that came in the form of sports. This was around 2014. High school finished, and I went to McMaster, Hamilton, which is about an hour away from Toronto, for university. I was studying life sciences, and the idea was that I would go to school, study sciences, and then become a dentist to follow the footsteps of my dad because it was a well paying job and it was a respectable career. And it was something that would put me in high status as a man in society. However, what ended up happening was unexpected and ended up changing the course of my life forever. My parents divorced the first year I was in uni, they decided to separate. And although it wasn't a complete shock, just dealing with that from afar was a challenge. I couldn't really understand what was happening. I wasn't home, I was away from home. And I was kind of hearing the stories on the phone from both sides, mom and dad, as I was coming into my own as an adult. And so being away, I got to hear what was happening at home, and it was difficult to not be there, but I'm also glad I wasn't there because I'm not sure how I would have responded. I was able to lose myself in academics and put my focus on school. And that was the theme up until my third year in university. I was studying. I wasn't the best student. I was getting good grades. I wasn't really engaging with the material, to be honest. I didn't like the way school was teaching. I was realizing that I'm not a fan of how it's very outcome oriented in the sense that you go to class. Um, you didn't really have to go to class, but you're assessed based on how well you do on tests. And then a lot of the material that I would absorb, it wouldn't really stick with me and it would eventually leave. If you ask me what I learned in my university career, I would speak more of the friendships I made, the experiences I had with my friends playing sports, and some of the practical things we did in labs. I remember doing it, but the lessons, what I took away from them, those things are blurry and cloudy and I can't recall. So I continued to dive into sports. I would train regularly. That's when I first started weightlifting. It was actually after a really bad ankle injury. I went for a layup, and when I landed, my ankle twisted, and I actually had the cops drive me home because I was so incapacitated as a human being. I couldn't walk. So the cops had to drive me home. And then, even though it was like a 10-minute walk to my residence, I couldn't make that walk. The school doctor was probably too busy taking care of all the other students that my ankle issue he just brushed off. I was supposed to wear a boot, but I just ended up getting crutches and kind of being in those crutches for a couple of months. This was my first serious injury that debilitated me, took me off my feet, and it made me realize how miserable of an existence I would have if I were to be fragile, weak, and unable to compete in sport. Therefore, I decided that I would pursue physical training as a serious discipline. The only other time I actually trained to become better at something was I remember my dad took me out to show me some soccer drills, just him and I realized how difficult it is to actually get good at soccer and master something. Of course, I'd been in camps before, but I never truly understood the discipline and the effort required to get good at a sport like soccer. So in university, my best friend and I, we would go to the gym, we would train, and I did the same with one of my other friends. And so it became a vehicle for me to connect with my closest friends and also a vehicle to develop myself, get better, get stronger. I had no idea what I was doing. Like I was definitely lifting wrong. I remember one particular evening, I went for max PR bench press. I put 2 plates on the bench on the bar, so 245 plates on each side, and I attempted a personal record at a time where the gym was empty. It was like 11 p.m. at night, and I failed my attempt. I dropped the bar on my chest, and I had to roll it down to my hips just so I didn't die. And then nobody was around. There was literally, and I was embarrassed to call for help. So I stood up, lifted up the bar, and then thought I could just like waddle it back to the rack. And this is where I injured my back. One of my most serious injuries, I would say, although it happened from something stupid, that was one of my most serious back injuries. And yeah, that kind of continued to develop my love for training and taking care of my body. I realized that there's these pursuits that can completely transform me, for one, and two, completely take me away from the busyness of the mind and the constant pursuit and pressure that seems like life throws at us to be able to get to the things that we want. And so I started to develop a true love for training. And during this time, I was still focused on trying to gain skills to become a dentist up until my 21st birthday around 2018, where I had an inflection point. This was a moment that I felt really alone and depressed. Although I was engaged in sports, I wasn't really fulfilled with what I was studying and pursuing. I wasn't really engrossed and engaged with school, and it never really had any meaning for me. And so that was something that truly lacked in my life, was meaning. And around the same time, I had started to meditate thanks to the influence of one of my roommates. And maybe it was my intuition becoming a little bit stronger. I felt a strong sense to just pause and reflect and redirect. And so on that night, my 21st birthday, I was in tears because I was just so miserable. And I decided I wouldn't pursue dentistry as a career. Maybe that was because of how I felt about my parents' relationship, and my dad being a dentist, not wanting the same type of life for myself. I didn't really understand it, but I knew that it wasn't a path I wanted to pursue. I made that decision, but my parents didn't really find out until about 6 months later when the applications for dental school were due, and I decided to not do them, and I didn't tell them. I told them after the deadline has passed, and everything was really set up for me to succeed as a dentist. I'd already done the dental exams, the dental aptitude test, which is a test you do to see how well you do so you get into school. I actually did really well. I scored in um, the 93rd percentile, so I was better than 90 plus percent of others in terms of the skills required to be a dentist. But still, I decided not to pursue the path. And so that really started a whole cascade of events. Obviously, I'd worked my whole life to become a dentist, to pursue that career. And suddenly, I had decided to change and I had to figure out what I wanted to do. My parents were concerned. They were worried. Um, they're still probably worried. They're like, what the hell are you doing with your life? And all I could say was that I'm going to figure it out. And so once school finished in about 2020, right before COVID hit, I decided to invest in a course. This was my first foray into entrepreneurship. That course I paid, my dad helped me pay for it. I didn't have any money. I was in debt. It was a $3,000 course. It was a $3,000 investment. My dad, God bless him, and I love him because he's always supportive of my decisions. He gave me the money and he's like, go invest, do what you need to do, and we'll figure it out. And so at this time, I started to really figure out things that I didn't learn in school. For example, how to come up with goals, how to improve my environment, how do I actually get the things that I want, which school never taught me. And so it started a whole path. This was during COVID. COVID just started, and I was at home focused on personal development. And I was so engaged and so locked in on this new version that I was becoming that the noise of the outside world really did not bother me. I wasn't consuming news. I wasn't really consuming social media. I didn't have an active Instagram account. So what I decided to do was start documenting my journey a little bit just to provide inspiration for other people. Because I found myself training harder than ever in COVID. I was testing my physical limits. I was doing Navy SEAL challenges. Like I would put on a backpack, run a mile with the same backpack. I would do like 50 pull-ups, 100 push-ups, 200 squats, and trying to test that for time during a period where everybody seemed to be in panic, in fear, and locked in their homes. So that Instagram page, which is one of my main channels for expression now, is probably where you will see some of the snippets of this solo episode, became my means of expression. And then I decided to create a product and sell it. And so in the late 2020, in December, I came up with this masterclass. It was called, I'm not sure what it was called, but the subject was turning your goals into daily habits. Like, how do you become the person you want to be through daily habits? 3 people invested, 3 of my friends. I reached out to everybody through Instagram DMs that was following my page, and I asked them if they would be willing to invest in this course that I made. And they did, and I'm so happy that they did. I'm forever grateful to those people because they showed me that I can make money online. That was my first dollar online. I think every seat was $50. And so I made $150 Of course, I was still in a big deficit because I had to invest in software and I had to spend so much time, but it showed me that I can make money online. And that was a big shift for me. And it was one of the something permanently changed in the way I saw the world once I made that first dollar. And this was one of the key lessons that I'll discuss later is once I saw that I could make money online, once I got a taste, I realized that I could probably do this more. I just had to figure out how. And so the next year, I kind of started to experiment, to dabble in that sort of area. I realized that the course I bought was one way I got impacted through online education. And so that's what I have to figure out how to do for other people. So I invested in several mentors over the last years, and I still do. And I still believe it's one of the best investments you can make is yourself because you're never going to go broke investing in yourself. When you become more valuable, you can add more value to other people, and that's the way it works. Like we're all equal at the level of our souls, but the way you become unequal in the marketplace is by delivering more impact, delivering a better product, delivering a better service, and doing it more consistently to other people. So 2021, I had made my first dollar. I was feeling good. I started to experiment with courses, coaching. None of those things really took off. I was making, small bits of money here and there. I'm talking like a few dollars. And at this time, my parents are like, what are you doing with your life? Like, this is getting you nowhere. There's no results. You're getting no traction. And they were right. Like, I didn't really know what I was doing, and I wasn't really taking the level of action that was necessary to see the results that I wanted. So I decided to go for a master's, two masters actually. This was in 2021 to 2023. I went to the United States. I was in North Carolina, Appalachian State University, and took part in the IOHRM program, which is one of the best programs for its kind in the country. And I chose that university because one, it gave me the opportunity to get two masters. So I got a master's in arts in industrial organizational psychology and human resource management. And then the second master's I got was an MBA, Master's of Business Administration in human resource management. So 2 masters later, in one of the most beautiful spots I've ever lived in, having worked in coding and research during that time, while also very intensely focusing on personal development, because I realized that the more I learn, the better I become, the more alive I feel, and the more I can contribute to other people. So that kind of became a central focus in my life, a central tenet to always pursue growth and always seek to give it back to other people, which is what's happening right now in this episode as I give to you what has taken me a decade to learn. I know the story has been drawn out, but I hope you see some parallels in there, and then I'll get into the lessons in a couple of minutes here. So I returned to Canada after I finished my master's, and I could not find a job in the field that I had worked so hard for, that I went in debt for, that my parents supported me over the course of 2 years and several tens of thousands of dollars to get these 2 masters. I could not find a job in my field. But I wasn't going to just sit around and do nothing. So I started to deliver with Uber Eats and earn a very respectable income of about $300 to $400 a week. This was super embarrassing. And just before I did Uber, I also did a stint in sales, where I would try to stop people on the street and sell them charity. And that also had a really, not the best income, maybe like $1,500 to $2,000 a month. But I learned so much through that job that it ended up serving me and is still serving me to this day. So Uber Eats, and I decided to continue to invest in myself through mentors, coaches that I've had throughout this entire period since 2020 since 2020 to today, 2026. I've almost always had somebody in my corner that I would borrow belief from and that would speak potential into me. And somebody that is in my family, because my family is there and they love me and they support me, but sometimes they can limit our perspective just because they want to protect us. And so they love us, they want us to win, but they say things that don't always support our highest potential. And I'm sure you have somebody in your life that you can think about right now that you love, they're dear to you, but because they love you so much, they're also worried about you and they want to protect you. And sometimes they say things or they do things that make you feel doubtful, make you feel like you don't have what it takes to make your dreams happen. And so I always try to have somebody in my corner that does the opposite, to try to breathe life into me. And it's also somebody that I want to have traits, qualities, and results of. That's been one of the hacks that I will share with you in the second part of today's conversation. So 2023, investments in myself continued, and I had a breakthrough at several points. I got hired at LA Fitness as a personal training counselor. So I was selling personal training, and I didn't feel deserving of that job because I actually just wanted to be a trainer. I just wanted to have some extra income with a job that would pay me more, and ended up going in there again, improving my skill of sales, taking a lot of action. During the same period, I signed up my first client online who paid me $2,000 to help him lose weight and get in shape. And so it became another one of those moments that I was like, oh, I can actually make big money. I'm actually capable of selling bigger deals and bigger packages. And so that opened up another world for me online. Between that first sale and mid 2025, I continued to work at LA Fitness. I continued to develop my skills. I continued to become a better salesperson and a better trainer, improving my knowledge of the human body, the human mind, and how to have conversations where eventually somebody says, I want to buy this thing that you have from you. That was my sole focus between 2024 and 2025. And in the meantime, I was continuing to build my online brand, my ability to speak to camera, speak to crowds. I went off to Florida for the first time ever to speak at a conference, at a medium-sized conference, and that was a big accomplishment. I continued to develop myself as a person. And in the summer of 2025, I got recruited to one of the top wellness clubs in Toronto that was being built at the time. So I got the opportunity to be a part of something amazing, new, and disruptive in the health and wellness industry. And that's where I'm at today, a high performance coach at Avant with a full roster of clients and working with people that I'm helping create breakthroughs in their quality of life and in the way they experience pain, in the way they see themselves, and in the way they feel about strength, longevity. And it's just something I love and I feel a true calling and mission for. So my income over the last 2-3 years has exploded dramatically, 200 to 300%. And I would dedicate it to all the work I have done in the past and all the people along my path, including my parents that have been there for support, knowledge, inspiration, perspective, wisdom when I needed it most. So here we are, 2026, quarter number 1, and I'm more focused and locked in than ever on my mission, on living my purpose, and on really making a meaningful impact on as many people as I can. And in this journey in the last decade, there's been certain lessons that I've learned and I continue to apply that have allowed me to create breakthroughs, have allowed me to step out of a negative spiral and get things into a positive direction again. And I believe these are the lessons that you can apply today to be able to make things happen in your own reality. So I'm going to get started with lesson number one, which is you will never go broke investing in yourself. What you earn and keep is a direct reflection of how you see yourself and the people you surround yourself with. I remember that one of the main decisions I made during that time of personal development in COVID was I decided to quit weed because I noticed that it was making me foggy. I was addicted to it. I was addicted to it. I was craving it. I just had to stop that habit so I could think more clearly and be able to have time for the things that I was creating and the person I was becoming. I had a friend in that period that I would spend a lot of time with, and he was the main influence for me to smoke. And so I remember it was a difficult conversation I had to have. I sent him a message and I just told him that I think it's best that we aren't friends anymore because I don't believe that you're a positive influence on my life. And so that decision ended up taking me away from that environment and that individual. And naturally, I didn't really feel the need to smoke anymore. And it's turned me into a different person. Now, that friend I ran into recently, sometime in the last 2 years, and they were still performing the same habits and being the same person, maybe even at a worse level than they were before. And the point I'm trying to make is you will always gravitate towards the habits of the people you surround yourself with. Even if you're not truly aware of it, or if you are aware of it, it's something that is in your control and it's something that you can change. Which is why I always try to put myself in proximity of people that have the traits, qualities, and the results that I want. And so if you think about the 5 people you spend the most time with right now, just take a moment to consider the 5 people that not only you spend time with physically, but the 5 people you allow to influence you. Is it a news broadcaster, social media influencer? Is it family? Is it friends? Is it somebody you listen to on their podcast? Is it people whose books you read, music you listen to, managers, bosses, coworkers? Who are the 5 people in your circle that you pay the most attention to and you allow to influence you most? Now consider the person you want to become in the next 12 months. Are the people you're allowing to influence you, are they aligned with the person you want to become in the next 12 months? Are their traits, their qualities, their characteristics, and their results aligned with the type of person you want to become? The people you hang out with, they have an impact on your aura. Their aura has an impact on your aura. And so understanding who in your circle you can spend more time with or less time with makes a dramatic influence on how you see yourself. And this is aligned with the idea that you never go broke investing in yourself, because you spending time with certain people more intentionally becomes a way for you to upgrade yourself and you see yourself in a better light. Now, the second lesson that I've learned through this period that I think has been highly valuable is how you see is more important than what you see. And I want to share a story that happened to me recently about this principle. And it's about getting sick during a time of being highly successful. When March came to a finish, I had been on such a strong run and such an intense bout of effort to hit my personal record in hours service that I fell sick. I hadn't slept properly the whole month. Um, I had early mornings, like almost every morning, every weekday morning, I would wake up at 5:30 a.m. I would take my dog for a walk, make sure my meals are prepared, get dressed, get to work. And often my days would span from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. I would get home, walk my dog, watch a little bit of TV. On some nights, on other nights, I continued to work on personal development. And so I wasn't really sleeping much. I was sleeping maybe 6 hours on average at best, both in February and in March. And so when I got sick, I had to take 3 days off. It was really difficult for me on that first day because on that first day, I was still optimistic. I didn't want to accept that I was sick. I was resisting the feeling of sickness. And I kept thinking, this is a failure. This is a loss. I've worked so hard to get up to this point, and all for what? All for me to get sick and lose all the momentum that I've built over the last 60 days. And it took me a while to realize on day 3 of being sick, having being stuck at home and missing out on a bunch of sessions that I could have serviced, that it could have got me paid. I realized that there's a lesson in this because that wasn't the first time it had happened. Back in November, I had a record month, and in December, I got sick because I wasn't taking good enough care of myself. And so this lesson reappeared, and I knew that it wasn't going anywhere unless I learned from it. And so what I took away from that experience was I can't pour from an empty cup. I need to prioritize my rest, my sleep, my emotional and mental reset. And that would have to come in the form of a shift in my schedule. And so I started to brainstorm what I could do in terms of client times so I can have a little bit more time to myself and a little bit more time to reset. So I started making the change, and the tool I want to share with you is the perspective shift. There's certain things in your brain and in your mind, in your belief system that color the way you see things. Like if you look at two people that go to the same movie, they're going to have a completely different experience based on what they look for and what they see. And so the beliefs, the perspectives, and the mental models and assumptions you have about the world, yourself, and people around you shape what you experience. Let's take work, for example, because we all work, or I hope you're working, I hope you're looking for work or have some way of contribution to the world that we look at differently, where everybody sees work a little bit differently. Do you see work as pleasure or a duty? Do you have to work, or is it honestly a choice and an opportunity and a blessing? Those two feel different. Do you see work as just work and having to do it, or do you see it as play? Do you see it as fun? Do you see it as exploration and curiosity? Do you see it as getting a list of things done, or do you see it as a mission, as a way to contribute to the world at large, as a way to express your gifts? It reminds me of this story of the 3 stonemasons who are working on a project. Go up to the first guy, you ask him, "What are you doing?" He says, "I'm just working on the stone, I'm just hacking away, just doing something very basic and just working on the stone." You go to the second stonemason and you ask him, "What are you doing?" He says, "I'm building a wall, just putting brick on top of brick. I'm building a wall." So he's working on something a little bit larger, and the stonemason says, "I'm doing it to feed my family." So he's doing it as a duty to feed his family. And then you go to the final stonemason, the third one. You ask him what you're doing, and he says, I'm creating art and I'm building something amazing for the world to see. Each of these stonemasons has a different experience. And I would say the one that's creating art, or even the man that's feeding his family, they have the most meaning. But certainly the one that is creating art is the one that has the lightest feeling about his work because it's an expression. It's creative, it's artistic. And so the way we see work and the label we put on it and the beliefs we have about not just work, but anything in your life becomes the way you experience it. And so take a moment to consider the perspective and the belief you have about the work you do. Do you see it as a mission? And if you don't, what's stopping you from seeing it as a mission? Maybe it's something you actually change in the way you see, or it's something you have to change in what you do, and how you talk about it. Because the way you talk about things becomes internalized. Your way of seeing things becomes internalized and becomes your experience. So that's lesson number 2. How you see things is more important than what you see. And finally, the third lesson that I've learned over the last decade that I wish I knew a bit earlier is momentum drives results. Momentum drives results. And for this lesson, I'll share another story with you. I recently had a hip injury, let's call it, where I was lifting super heavy and I noticed my lower back area started to bother me during certain movements. Whenever I would do a deadlift or when I would pick things up off the ground, it would start to give me this sharp pain. And I started to think, maybe I have a serious injury. Maybe I messed something up during my lift because I was going so heavy. And I started to be cautious about my back. I started to believe that I had this injury that I couldn't really figure out and that it was causing problems for my body. And so as a result, I started to be a little bit more tense every time I moved a certain way. I picked things up, and in any sort of workout I did, I was super cautious. And so I wasn't really moving the way I would have wanted to. I wasn't moving the way my body was designed to move. And I found myself tensing up at that region every time I moved. And so as a result, I ended up moving those muscles a little bit less, that area of my body a little bit less. And the pain got worse until I reached a point where I just stopped and paused and I thought, what actually is happening here? Am I actually in pain because there's something wrong in my body? Or am I in pain because I think something is wrong? And so it turned out a combination of both was true. I probably had weakness in that area, but I had to go through a mode of gradually exploring the lower back injury through other modes of Pilates and taking time off and even massage to realize, okay, it's not actually that serious of a problem, but I'm making it worse in my head by imagining that it hurt. And so I'm back to 100% now, lifting heavy, and it's still there from time to time, but I'm realizing gradual exposure to challenge is making it a lot better. And so it comes back to this idea of when you believe something about yourself, you aren't able to get as good of a result. And the way it works is if you have a moment, if you're sitting down, take 4 squares, one on each corner of a piece of paper. On the top left-hand side, write beliefs. On the top right-hand side, write potential. On the bottom right-hand side, write action. And the bottom left-hand side, write results. And then draw a line in between these 4 squares. So the beliefs you have affect how much you think you have in your potential, and then how much action you take based on that potential, and then the action you take leads to the results. In my example, I believed I was in pain, so I wasn't moving. I didn't believe that my body could move the way that I wanted it to, and so the way I acted was in like a compensation way and uncomfortable way, and so the results I got were just feeding into that belief of, oh, my body's in pain. Let's take it to an area of your life. Take an area of your life where you feel stuck. What do you believe about that area? What do you imagine when you think about this area? And this could be an area that you previously were winning in, but right now it doesn't feel as easy. Maybe it's career, maybe it's money, maybe it's your intimate life, maybe it's your health. Now, shifting focus to another area where you feel powerful. What do you believe about this area that you're winning, that you have a positive momentum in? And what goes in your mind when you think about this area? This concept of momentum is so interesting because it's one of those things that it's almost elusive. When you build it, you have to work so hard to build it. And then when you're on a roll, it just seems like you can't be stopped. But when it gets interrupted, when it comes to a halt, when speed comes to zero, that momentum feels like such a drag to build back up again, which is another reason why I was not really feeling good about my sickness, because I knew how much work it had taken to build that momentum. And I knew that for me to build it back up, I would have to work hard again to just come back to where I was before. But momentum is magic. Momentum is magic. Without momentum, it's hard to build something special. And when you have it, you just have to appreciate it and try to protect it. And when it's gone, you have to find a way to rediscover it, because momentum is what leads to results in the long run. That's all I wanted to share with you today. These are lessons that have been hard for me to learn, and they continue to resurface in my life. And it will never get old, in my opinion, for you to be able to drive results using momentum, shift the way you see things, which is more important than the things you see. And finally, to never not invest in yourself, because you can not go broke investing in your potential. I trust that you got what you needed from this episode, and I'm really not sure when I'll be back here, but this is a format that I've really enjoyed. This is my second time doing it. This is my first time actually talking to the camera face to face, and it feels right. It feels freeing. It feels like a practice I want to do more of, and of course, I'm hopeful that it makes a true difference for you in your life. So that's the end of my solo episode. I'm going to call it, and I'll catch you on the next one. Cheers.